Hi, everybody. My name is Jared Milrad. I am the founder of Movie Karma. We're a nonprofit organization based here in Los Angeles. And as many of you know, we focus on inclusion, equity, representation, as well as social impact through the power of storytelling. And today on our podcast here, Rewriting Hollywood, we're having a special guest who is doing some great work, definitely having social impact through storytelling. We've been really fortunate to have some incredibly talented Oscar eligible and now Oscar shortlisted guests on the show, and today's guest is certainly no exception. Her name is Phumi Morare. She's the writer, and director of the new Oscar shortlisted short film called When the Sun Sets, which is now being considered for the 2022 Academy Awards in live action shorts. She's joining us today from Los Angeles, and really excited to talk to her about her powerful film as well as her background in the industry and beyond. So, Phumi, thank you so much for being on the show. Excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
Absolutely. So let's dive in. Would love to start with the beginning of your journey. When we saw that you're a South African award-winning writer-director, you are based here in LA. You've completed an MFA in film directing at Chapman University. You have a background also in investment banking, I saw at Goldman Sachs, and management consulting at McKinsey and Company. Tell us a little more, if you would, put me about your journey. And when did you think about going into filmmaking as a career?
So filmmaking for me, I came across it when I was in high school. I used to do a lot of theater and creative writing, and so already loved storytelling. But I took a class in high school where we studied some films, and just learning about how films were made and just the art of cinema really blew my mind away. And I felt like that was a medium that I wanted to explore for telling stories. But at the time, I didn't have anyone who was in my community or family who was in the arts. And so I couldn't sort of work out how to make a career of it. And I was really good at math. So my family kind of encouraged me down that path of like finance and business. And so that's what I studied in college, and that was my first job, was in finance. But that desire to do film, that itch was always it remained with me. And I would, do short courses on the side. I would attend film festivals and be part of film societies. And then there was, excuse me, there was a time when I was sitting at my spreadsheet at 3 a.m. At my job, and I was just thinking of the meaning of life. And and that's when I kind of felt like, this isn't what I feel is the way I want to spend my time and my life. I want to do something that really makes me feel alive. And so I started seriously considering going into film. And through a mentor, I was introduced to a producer who allowed me to do like an internship with him part time. And eventually, I decided to completely leave my job and go into the film industry.
Wow. Okay. So took a turn. I've taken many turns in my life, so I relate to everything you said. And also relate to the kind of academic sounds like academic pursuits that you've taken some of those turns within, which I want to hear more about. Um, Tell us a little bit, though, if you would, about your childhood, because it sounds like you didn't really feel like you maybe saw yourself in this career from a young age. Like, did you have any mentors or folks encouraging you to consider a path in the arts, or did you just feel like you didn't have any connectivity to it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. So the person that I had when I was in high school was my drama teacher, because that's what I he was a teacher that I was doing theater with, and he basically would say to me, Pumi, one day you could write and direct, and he was saying, I think, in the context of theater. And in my mind, like the idea of that was really cool and I loved it, but I couldn't see it because I didn't know anyone that was doing that in my world. And so he was, I guess, one person who believed that that was in me, from that age, and is a person that I also want to find and thank for believing in me that way. But other than that, I think the people who encouraged me to go into the film industry I met later on in life. So when I was in my early 20s and my first job networking in the film industry, that's where I met some mentors who encouraged me.
Interesting. Yeah, I want to hear a little more about that. So I saw that you worked as a junior producer at a film production company in South Africa, and you co-created a show that was commissioned by the SABC, which is a national broadcaster there. And you've also, I think, as you alluded to, freelanced as a strategist at Statement Films, which incubates African female content creators. When you were in these opportunities and starting to get more down the path of doing something perhaps in film or the arts, what was that? What were those early days like? Because I know sometimes it can be tough to find sure footing in the industry and make an income doing it and kind of get your bearings.
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky with the first job that I got in the industry. So the producer who allowed me to do this internship with him, because although he was looking for someone with kind of business skills to help him with like pitch presentations and stuff like that, he was really willing to mentor me in the things that I was interested in the industry. So when I told him that, yes, I have producing skills, but I would love to write, I would love to direct, then he took me seriously and he allowed me to help out on some of the development of their projects. And that led to the show that I helped to co-create. And then when I told him, I really want to direct, he encouraged me to take some time off work and shoot short films. So I shot 2 short films when I worked with him through his like mentorship. And he was really great because you don't always find that in someone you're working for, that they're interested in you holistically. And so he eventually became my mentor and is still a mentor of mine and a great champion of mine. And so I feel very lucky that way. And then also, when I was in the corporate world, I did have a mentor who was very open minded as well. And when I told her that, um, although I'm here, I really want to do film. She told me, you know what, you're young, you have the opportunity to take risks and do things differently, so you might as well try it. And she's still a mentor of mine today as well, even though she's in the corporate world. And so yeah, I think the people that I came across during work, I gravitated towards people who just saw me holistically, which was great.
Yeah, and incredibly important to have someone that supports you in that way and sees you, as you said, sees you holistically, sees you fully. Um, from that point forward, I saw that you went to Chapman, you did the MFA, um, and you have obviously training in film directing. Talk to us a little bit about some of the earlier projects that you made before your current one, When the Sun Sets. How did you go about kind of finding your artistic voice, and what were some of the challenges there?
Yeah, film school for me was just such a great environment to help me find my voice, because I really got to kind of play and experiment in an environment that had low stakes. And so I had really awesome professors that I was working with along my film school career that helped me find my voice, helped me, directed me to like films that were aligned to my tastes and interests and stuff like that, that helped me over time to figure out what it is that I was drawn to. And, even to this day, I feel like it's something that I'm still constantly discovering, like constantly honing, what my voice is. But yeah, over the course of film school, I realized that I was drawn to stories about women, and stories about people who kind of have to overcome insurmountable odds. And so those are the stories that I started doing later on towards like getting closer and closer to my thesis film. And so that's my thesis film, which is When the Sun Sets, was actually me feeling like I wanted to connect to something that was culturally authentic to me. Because although I was in the US and in Hollywood and at a film school in California, I am still a South African, and I have South African stories that are dear to me. And so my thesis, I felt like one of the things I wanted to do was just, be true to who I am and where I come from, and meld that interest in women's stories with that desire.
Yeah, which is such an important point, right? Because I think a lot of times, especially young filmmakers, sometimes maybe want to tell a story they saw on TV or in film or something that is so divorced from their own lived experience that you can tell it's not authentic. But with your story, it does feel very tied to who you are and your family's history, which I understand is true. That it's the film, for those who haven't seen it, it's a really powerful look at a nurse who's navigating and sort of negotiating her reality while living through apartheid and trying to protect her family in 1980 South Africa. And I understand the story is based on your own family story and your own mother's journey. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how did the story kind of come to life for you?
Yes, the story is based on something that happened to my mom in the 80s. And I found out about it about 7 years ago when I was just chatting to my mom one day in the kitchen. And I was telling her stories my grandmother was teaching me about her life and her past. And I was telling her how surprised I was about the things that my grandmother experienced during apartheid. And that's when my mom brought up the story saying, "You wouldn't believe this one experience I had." And when she's told me the story of how she saw her brother getting abducted by these militant apartheid police, and how she knew that if she didn't do anything in that moment, she might never see him again. I was honestly really blown away because, firstly, my mom is a very gentle person.
Mhm.
So to think of her confronting these aggressive militant police is very shocking, and it made me curious about what is it that we have in us, that what is that inner power that we all have in us, and how does it get unleashed, when the situation arises, and how do you get to that point, you know because for me, I was thinking that the power of her having gotten to that point is that she saved her brother, and they walked away, um, sort of free from that moment and having kind of overcome that moment of aggression. And so that was something I was curious about, and it stuck with me over the years. And at film school, one of my professors was saying when we were developing our thesis ideas was we should write about the things that haunt us. And this really haunted me, this story, because I thought of all of the things that could have happened to my mom and to my uncle. And I also couldn't wrap my mind around how my mom transformed into that person who did that. So this was also my way of processing the story, and also it was my way of, because I thought it was something that was so important to share, that there was this ordinary woman who did this heroic act, and I think that was like just really important for me to share with the world.
Yeah, incredibly important to share, and obviously a courageous act by your mom, and I'm sure is repeated many times throughout the country and throughout that time. What are the things as you started to craft this narrative, and of course based on your family's true experience? What are the things that you wanted people to know about the apartheid era, particularly people who are maybe not from South Africa, or young people in South Africa who obviously did not live through that time? Because I feel like, at least in the U.S., we hear bits and pieces of what that was like, right? From stories about Nelson Mandela, or sort of Desmond Tutu, who just passed away sadly, or other other incredible icons, but we don't really have a full perspective of that time and place. So what were the things that you felt like people should know about that time?
Well, it kind of started with what I wanted to know about that time, and that was what was day-to-day life like for my family, and also especially for women, you know. And I think there's also just I grew up a lot around a lot of women in my family, and so that's why I was also just interested in sort of their ordinary lives. And so I think whenever I heard a story from my grandmother or my mom, I feel like it wasn't fully, I couldn't fully grasp it. It's very, very difficult to grasp, you know, that time because it's just otherworldly. And so even when I was making this film, in order for me to fully understand the gravity of, you know, what my mom did and what their daily lives were like, I had to immerse myself in archival footage, in news articles, in photography, just to really understand. And so my own process of trying to understand what was life like for my family and ordinary people and women, that I wanted to share with other people, because my generation and younger generations, you know, I personally didn't have that ability to grapple with it in a tangible way. So I was hoping to give people another opportunity to grapple with the history in a tangible way for them. And then for people who aren't South Africans, just to give them a glimpse into the ordinary life of people in those times.
Yeah, so incredibly, I think, valuable and a great example of the power of storytelling as a as an impactful art form to show a lens into a world that we obviously many of us will never lived in and hopefully will never experience again in that way. Um, I'm curious in terms of the reaction you've been getting to the film uh, from different audiences around the world, because one of the fascinating things I think about any film that has some historical resonances or truths behind it uh, is that sometimes people go, you know, and react and think like that was then sort of thing. Like we've you know, this looks tough for those people, but luckily, you know, nothing like that's happening now. Especially people who are in the majority, whether they're white folks or they're, you know, et cetera. So I wonder, has the reaction been disparate? Has it been, you know, divergent depending on who's watching and what their own lived experiences have been, and what has the response been like?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll start with the South African reaction. That reaction was really fascinating to me because, I mean, when I was making this film, I thought about what you're saying. I thought people will probably think, oh, this is irrelevant today. Why is she telling this story? You know? But then I just felt my own conviction that I just wanted to tell it just because I thought it was important for me. But I wasn't sure if people would think that it's, you know, that's for that time and it should stay there. But then what I found with South Africans, and you know, I also wasn't sure how they would respond because I know a lot of people also want to kind of move on from that time and tell new stories. But I would have people sending me messages on Instagram saying, I saw your film at this festival and it helped me talk to my grandmother about what happened to her, or it helped me talk to my uncle. And that was so moving to me because I didn't expect that to be the outcome. And then for international audiences, I mean, I'm still wrapping my mind fully around what it is that people are resonating with, but I think it's just the idea of, you know, that, you know, love can overcome even the darkest kind of things, and love can sort of help you transcend oppression, and it also, it's in a way it's a celebration of motherhood in different forms. And so I think maybe that's what's resonating. Some people have said that for them, it helps them think about other situations in the world that are similar and still happening today. And so yeah, it's been interesting, like, because I had no idea how people would respond.
Right.
So it's been just fascinating seeing what the response is. Yeah.
That is fascinating. And yeah, it's interesting that how people connect in different ways. But certainly the piece about protecting your family and at any cost, especially from a mother's perspective, I think will certainly resonate. I'm sure it has resonated around the world. Um, as you look at your own lived experience, having South African heritage but living here in the United States, being a person of color in the States, and knowing about the Black American experience versus South African experience. I've been fortunate to spend some time in college in Botswana and other parts of the continent, and was always struck by how Black Africans would talk about their perspective on the American Black experience or the American experience in general, and how there's differences with some similarities. And so I wonder, especially in light of making this project, which seems to kind of, I imagine, based on your own lived experience, touch on both continents in a way. Um, I just wonder how you think about your own journey. Having come from that heritage and now all the struggles we're having in the States around equality and equity and civil rights issues.
Yeah. Um, hmm. I mean, I definitely, so the film is, still very specific to South Africa.
Hmm.
And I think what we're experiencing today is sort of, yes, there is like a connection, like we kind of um, we're having similar experiences in the U.S., or the Black experience in the U.S. is similar to what it has been in South Africa. But I don't think the film was trying to speak to both. It was just trying to speak to like what I know, which is the South African experience.
Hmm.
But yeah, there definitely has been, I mean, one thing that has been fascinating to me is um, even like the song that's in the film by Miriam Makeba. Um, she was her song and her music was meant to be kind of sharing social messages, and she spoke a lot against apartheid in her music. And when she came to the U.S., she felt a camaraderie with the struggle here, and she even actually married her second husband was Stokely Carmichael, who's also known as Kwame Ture, who is one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party. And so there was that camaraderie. So I definitely feel like, because I've also lived in the UK. And I've seen sort of like the Black experience there as well. And so I definitely feel like there's a camaraderie and there's similarities in the struggle and an ability to kind of relate. Yeah, but the film was specifically about the South African experience.
Right, about your sort of set in that time and place, of course. You've said for me that you are passionate about redeeming the African and feminine identity through cinema, that you enjoy exploring the female gaze's influence on telling intimate human stories of ordinary heroes and women. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that passion and why that's something that's really important to you to explore in your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, also just me wanting to see more depictions of people like me and people I grew up with on TV, and seeing them in ways that are holistic as well. One of the things that's really encouraging to me is I have a 6 year old niece right now, and just watching her being able to see shows and even animations that have representations of her, that is so powerful. And so I want to, just contribute to that. And those are the stories that I'm also drawn to because I'm a woman of color, And so, and I like writing about what I know as well. So yeah.
That's I mean, a good place to start for any writer, I think, is to write about what you know. Underrepresentation, to build on what you just said, on underrepresentation obviously persists in Hollywood. There's still a lot of ways to go on that issue, something we work on as an organization and as, of course, as a show, to try to spotlight people who are underrepresented and their stories. I wonder what thoughts you have on that, Phumi, in terms of how to make Hollywood more representative, equitable, or inclusive. What are things that you would like to see changed to towards that endeavor?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's about people being more intentional about who they're hiring behind the camera. You know, I think that's the place that obviously needs the most change. We're definitely seeing some progress, you know, in front of the camera, but there definitely needs to be a lot more progress behind it. And, you know, even something that I try and do when I'm working on films is being intentional about the people I work with. So this film that I worked on, we had a majority female key crew, and actually most of them were women of color as well. And then we also had our main crew also majority people of color. And so that was something that was just important to me and my producer to also be playing our part in making sure that you know we're opening doors and stuff like that, and contributing to changing what's behind the camera. So yeah, I think if people are just more intentional, and it requires more effort, you know, and it requires giving people an opportunity to, you know, maybe like take on a role that they haven't previously had an opportunity to do, so they get to step up into a slightly more senior position. And so yeah, it takes effort, it takes investment, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I do too. And we see the end result of stories like yours that are told in a really powerful, honest, and true way. That I think is speaks to that work and that mission. Before we close, Pumi, I'd like to ask some quick rapid fire questions, if you'll indulge us, to shorter questions and answers about some of your experiences and thoughts. The first we had for you is if there's a film that really inspires you, that maybe helped you along your journey as a filmmaker, that we should know about.
Yeah, I mean, the one behind me, Ida.
Yeah.
I really really love that film. I think the cinematography is really beautiful, and the storytelling is so beautiful, and the female lens on the film is really really striking. And I really love even the way that, although it's set in this sort of political context, and social context, it's this really intimate story, and it's a family story, and that's also kind of what inspired our approach to this to our film When the Sun Sets, is having this intimacy, this feminine family story, set in the context of this political context, but it's focused on, you know, the family and the minute. So yeah, and I just love the filmmaker, and his films, even his latest one, Cold War. He's just got such a distinct style that I really love.
That's really neat. Folks should check that out. And I love your point about staying grounded and focused on individual stories. Do you have a role model or someone that you look up to, either someone you know personally or someone who's more publicly known?
Yeah, I have a few people that I look up to that I would love to, you know, be like Chloe Zhao. Like I've followed her career since her first film, Songs My Brothers Taught Me, and I've just been so amazed with her trajectory, and also how she was able to start off with these sort of smaller indie films, and and is now just released a huge Marvel film. So she's one person that really inspires me. Sofia Coppola, I love her films, and also I'm really obsessed with finding like films that have a female gaze, and I think she's really really good at that as well. And so I love just studying her films for that reason as well. And Barry Jenkins, he's just got such a poetic style to cinema. And I also study his work as well, and really admire him. And then there's an African filmmaker called Osman Sembene, who's no longer with us, but I've also studied his work a lot. And he has also subversive female characters, and he also has a lot of social messages in his cinema. And he speaks a lot about post-colonial life of Africans, which is always very fascinating to me.
Yeah, all good answers and all good role models for sure. The last question I had for you is just if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing when you were younger, I wonder what that would be, and why would you tell yourself that one thing?
That's a good question. um, So one thing I would tell myself is it took me a while to leave my corporate job and go into film. I think it took me 3 years from the moment I decided I wanted to do it to actually doing it. And the biggest reason is because I was just afraid of the unknown. And so I think what I would tell myself to do differently next time is just trust your gut
Hmm.
and follow it, because you just never know where it would lead you. And I think there's something about our inner selves and our souls that just knows what is right for us. And I think it's about just listening and trusting that.
Yeah, so true and well said. I think there's that silent voice within, or that quiet voice within, that we all seem to have, that can be negative sometimes, but can also be really really truthful and really honest. And so
Yeah.
it sounds like you followed yours, and done some great work with it. Again, our guest today, Phumi Morare. The film is called When the Sun Sets. It's now Oscar shortlisted for the 2022 Academy Awards in live action short films. Has also been feted with a number of other awards and recognition. So congratulations, Phumi, on all the success with this film, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come. And it was a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.